Just to introduce myself, hi, I'm Rachel Seneque. I'm inclusion lead at Bengeworth CE Academy Trust and associate head here. So I work with a number of schools. Mainly my job is inclusion, and that's in principle why this innovation started, in terms of looking at our assessment model and looking at ways we were assessing our children, particularly those soft kind of metacognition assessments that perhaps weren't as robust as other measures we're using. So we're very excited to go into partnership and work with ImpactEd and Ella Knight, who is our school manager, who we work in partnership with, to evolve the platform and make it work for us as a school. But I'm really pleased to be here today.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, hi. As Rachel said, my name's Ella. I'm a school partnership manager for ImpactEd. And yeah, I'll briefly speak to a little bit about what we do, so that might be a bit of helpful to give a bit of background. Like Rachel said, we've actually been working with Bengeworth now for about 3 years. They were part of our co-design group. So one of our strategic partners is Challenge Partners, and we are kind of first piloted our innovation project in the Brilliant Club, which is a charity that you might have heard of, that is a university access programme for underprivileged pupils. And yeah, so we sort of piloted in that, and then we won the Teach First Innovation Scaling Award, the Innovation Award, in 2018. And yeah, and then we signed up Bengeworth to be sort of part of a co-design group, to really help us structure how we wanted our sort of innovation project to work. So yeah, I was actually the first sort of full-time hire back then. And yeah, so what we do is we help schools and charities to measure their impact. So it speaks quite a lot to the kind of conversations earlier in the session about sort of how do you measure the impact of what you're trying to do. And so we work sort of in partnership with schools on a very sort of broad approach, thinking about what do you want to measure the impact of? So what different interventions, initiatives, programs that you want to identify whether those things are working or not. We then use our online platform to support that process, to make it really sort of simple and easy to do. And like I said, Rachel at Bengeworth has had a massive impact on sort of shaping the platform so that it really supports their use, which has been a really exciting sort of thing to be part of. But like as the others kind of spoke to, we use a wide variety of different types of data on the platform, so we can sort of sync with school data systems to utilize data that schools already collect. We use sort of additional types of data that Rachel will speak to a bit, that maybe are really specific to different interventions that they're working on, so things like speech and language interventions, etc. And then we also use our sort of broader skills measures, which we have, which again Rachel spoke to about sort of metacognition. We did some research into basically a list of skills that have the biggest impact on life chances and outcomes. We came up with a list of 13 skills, so things like metacognition, resilience, self-efficacy, school engagement. So those skills, and we basically identified the most valid self-report surveys that exist in the academic literature to enable schools to sort of link those different metrics to different interventions and identify whether they're having the desired impact. Like it says here, we sort of go through a partnership process where we really support schools with that process, thinking about what initiatives they want to look at, what data they already collect, what data they want to collect, and how we can support them through that. And then we utilize sort of research as well. So we work across our kind of wider team and our wider associate researchers, looking at different ways that you can measure different interventions. And yeah, and then like I said, we use the platform that kind of makes that really simple and easy to monitor. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And then this is kind of showing the process that the platform is basically designed around. And again, it speaks to your report, I think, Ellie, really nicely, in that it's thinking about, and it kind of really gives clarity as to what schools want to look at. You know, they spend all of this time, money and energy on additional sort of interventions and programs. How do you really figure out whether those things are actually worth all that time, money and energy? So we kind of work through this process through the platform. So you kind of think about the research questions. So what do you want to measure the impact of? What are you trying to see change? Then we think about those measures. And like I said, we could sort of use like a huge variety of measures. We've also we're working on sort of not just attainment measures, but also, like I said, those broader skills, those validated self-report surveys, but then also kind of any sort of teacher surveys, wider types of data collection that we can use, even things like I mentioned before, even pictures of work from books and stuff we've included in reports before. And then you can try and identify control groups if possible, but generally quite challenging in smaller schools. And then it just kind of follows through a baseline. You take the baseline measure, you take the final measure, and then the platform generates an impact report for you. But then we also have a written impact report that summarizes that. And then ultimately the kind of key thing about this, which Rachel will speak to a lot more, is that ultimately that enables the school to make decisions based on reliable data from their context that they have kind of researched, and then ultimately make changes to sort of save time, money and energy. That's what we do.
So if I touch upon sort of the key headings that I chose as why we first started it, we wanted to have a look at how we were responding and how we were measuring the support that we were giving, particularly, I think, in its infancy, to our most vulnerable pupils, to ensure that it was robust and rigorous in all sense of purposes. And that really included primarily the interventions that we were running as a school for the social, emotional, mental health and nurture-based, which is so prevalent now. And indeed, I am so thankful, really, that our journey started, like Ella said, three years ago, because we are quite significantly ahead in terms of how well our students are doing, and knowing that, and being secure in our judgments of what provision we're putting in place to support our pupils' mental health at this time. And I know I'm speaking for many colleagues who are struggling at the moment in terms of managing the mental health needs, and we're a primary sector, but we've noticed quite a large increase in our students in needing that pastoral support. Perhaps I should have put this at number one, but reduced workload, definitely. It coincided with an adjustment in terms of our feedback and marking policy. We did away with any post-mortem marking. We only live feed in the lesson, and again verbal feedback. So it was all based around this evidence-based research. What is working? Why are we doing these things historically? Because somebody else is telling us to do them. So it takes a little bit of courage to take that leap of faith to say, I'm not doing that, it doesn't work, but actually having the backup. And I think ImpactEd has given me as a school leader the backup to say, I'm confident with doing this in the school because I know it works. And this is my account. I'm accountable ultimately for the progress of those students. So I know it's work. But also in terms of empowering staff, which was instrumental. As a leader, you're so conscious of saying, well, I want you to do this, staff, or we're doing this. And it's not got to be like that. Lots of things are top down. It's got to be driven by staff. They've got to see the purpose of it, and they need to be empowered with the tools in which to assess correctly and to know what they're doing is working well. So again, we've heard about the word accountability, but absolutely all teachers are teachers of SEN. They say all teachers are teachers of all the pupils. They need to know how well their pupils are doing in all things. Lots of schools send pupils out in groups to access support and interventions, but does the teacher really know how well they're working? And things are continually done, but what is the impact of those in the short term and the long term? Are they worth carrying on? So we sought to improve teaching and learning by exactly that, shortening that feedback loop between when you gather your data, whatever that might look like, and your assessment, and knowing if it's moving children on in whatever context, really. Information and making adjustments to teaching. So it enabled teachers to adjust it accordingly, ensuring that the interventions that were selected were having the maximum impact. So, for example, for a particular student, it allowed us to look at them and think, well, they've been doing that programme, but they haven't made as much progress as we would have liked them to. So what are we doing? What's not working for that pupil when the other pupils in that group that were accessing that intervention were making significantly more? So it goes down to kind of that minutiae of that detail. So it leads into number 7, that it enabled us to provide more meaningful, valid information that was that was immediate to us, and it addressed those misconceptions and allow staff to respond straight away. So it enabled them to come to those pupil progress meetings and know exactly what was having the most impact on our students. So in terms of the how, it is in 4 stages that it was broken down into. The first stage was really just preparing the platform. What's it going to look like for us? So that started in 2018. And again, it was myself and our data lead and assessment lead. So touching on what Rob said, you're expert in assessment. So that was a model that we used in terms of, I had a good understanding of what inclusion looked like and what I wanted to, what inclusive practice should like, what assessment should look like for many of our students. And I suppose my bugbear, a bit like what Mary was saying, was why are we trying to do this linear approach to assessment? Our work with many of our students isn't like that, and how do we capture that as best we do? So we had a discussion about working alongside ImpactEd to put those interventions and the corresponding measure tools and scales onto the platform. And I must stress the importance that they are all evidence-based. And I worked as well with the educational psychologist, who we have a really good relationship with, in terms of what's out there, what has the most impact, what can we use? And that evolved in terms of a small-scale pilot. So myself and Natalie, the data lead, thought, okay, let's pilot it. We're not going to roll it out to the school. Let's do it ourselves for this year and see if it's going to work. Because the worst thing for doing to teachers is rolling something else, then thinking, oh, actually, not quite sure. Let's stop that. And they think, what a waste of time. And again, you've lost teacher confidence straight away. So we trialed the platform, and initially, I involved the SENCO here as well. So I'm also the SENCO, but I have another SENCO who works with me, and she trialled it in her classroom with small scale pilots. We chose just a select few interventions to run to see what kind of reports we were getting. And then number 3, we refined it in terms of our approach to preparing the rollout. So again, it was myself and Natalie that worked on that, the data lead. And then we adjusted measurements and the scales to fit Bengeworth's profile of interventions. And then we prepared whole staff training. And my key there was to make it really simple and quick. And so they could see that impact straight away. And we rolled it out in the last stage. We did actually make the decision to follow it up with our classroom support professionals, our lead classroom support professionals, because they have a huge kind of weighting in terms of their influence with the interventions that we run and the support that we run. And I also wanted to empower them with the tools to be able to reflect on the assessments that they were carrying out. So all staff received the training on the platform, and Ella co-presented that with me, alongside me, and then we used the platform to assess the impact of some of our interventions. So even in that stage, we only refined it to make it really smart. So what have we learned along the way? So I've done sort of a line of what was really important and the key things. The initial launch was staff buy-in. So what's it going to do for me as a teacher? Is it going to save me time and reduce my workload? Yes, it is. So previously we were using quite a hefty kind of, I suppose for want of a better word, spreadsheet of RAG rating the impact of our interventions. But I wanted to go away from that, and this has reduced the need to do any of that. So there's no paper-based interventions at all. They're all on the platform now, which is obviously were some sort of process well into that. At this stage, we weren't there. To summarise progress within an intervention really, really quickly, so a teacher can look at it and think, yeah, they've made 3 years progress, or they've made progress with their confidence or metacognition skills. To increase the increase in initial workload for key drivers was true to say. So I would be fibbing if I said there wasn't a little bit of a workload to start with, but that fell mainly on the team that was central to driving the initiative forward. So you do need a team of people. It helps that I was a senior leader as well. So I obviously have got sort of the rights in terms of school priorities to embed that within our CPD culture as well.